In this video, we're going to set up AWS CLI on a Linux machine. So let's get into it. I'm going to show to you how we can set up AWS CLI on a Linux machine, specifically a Ubuntu machine, but the process is pretty much similar for most Linux distributions. So let's get started. Okay, great. So here I am connected to a Ubuntu machine with SSH. The machine is running on EC2. This is the machine. So for installing AWS CLI on the machine, I'm pretty much going to follow the official documentation from AWS. So here you can see the documentation, the process for installing it on Linux, on macOS, or Windows. So in our case, I'm going to use the Linux version. So here you can see the official distributions supported by AWS. You can use it on CentOS, Fedora, Ubuntu, or Amazon Linux 1 or Amazon Linux 2. If you're using Amazon Linux 2, you already have AWS CLI installed on your machine, so you're good to go to the next steps. But if you're not using Amazon Linux, if you're using like Ubuntu in our case, so you need to do this process. So the first thing that you need to do is to copy this curl command, paste it here, and then use this unzip command. In our case, we don't have the command, so we will be required to install it, as you can see here. So first of all, I'm going to apt get update. Oh, sorry. After this, let's try the command required by AWS. I'll clear this. And try the command. Perfect. Now let's try to unzip the file again. Copy this here and paste it here. Perfect. So now let's install AWS CLI. Great. So to check if AWS CLI is already installed, let's do AWS -- version. As you can see here, now we have AWS CLI properly installed on our machine. Now let's set up a user for making some experimentations. So for accessing AWS features and services, we need at least one user from AWS CLI. Because if I try to do like AWS S3 LS for listing the buckets on S3, you will see that there is no credentials configured on this machine with AWS CLI, so we need at least one user for configuring AWS CLI and use the credentials and permissions from that user with AWS CLI. So let's create a user here on IAM for making this. So let's go to IAM and create a new user. So let's go to users and then let's create a new user. So I'm gonna call it test AWS CLI. In our case, we don't need the management console. So if this user, if you want to grant the access to this user to access the AWS console, this panel here, so you need to enable this flag. But in our case, it's only for code permissions and the CLI, so it's not required. Next, for now, I'm not going to attach this user to any group since this is an experiment. If you want, you can attach the policies here, but let's do this later on. For now, I'm just going to create the user, and then let's create the user. Perfect. Let's click here. And then here, once you access the user page, let's go to security credentials, and then we'll scroll to access keys, and then let's create a new access key for this user. In this case, I'm going to use it for command line interface. So there's a new approach from AWS for AWS CLI using SSO and a rotated token. But in our case, we're gonna stick to the previous method, which is more simple to use and more suited for SSH machines. You can configure the other one later on as well if you prefer. So let's select here command line interface. Here you can see the other ways, the other use cases that you can create the access keys for your application. So let's confirm here that I understand the recommendations from AWS, and let's click on next. I'm not gonna add a tag here, and that's it. So this is our access key and our secret key. Let's go back to the machine. So I'm gonna say AWS configure. So this is going to be the access key ID and the secret access key. I'm gonna copy it here and paste it here. So in our case, we're going to use for US West 2. US West 2. That's it. Now we are using these credentials for AWS CLI. Let's try now to make some experiments. If for some reason this access key get leaked into the internet, you can pretty much just deactivate or delete these access keys and create a new one for your application. So let's try, for example, to list all buckets from AWS S3, AWS S3 LS. So you see that this user doesn't have access to accessing S3. So let's go back here to users and then to permissions, and let's attach directly a permission to access AWS S3. So for now, I'm gonna say that it's going to have the full access or the read-only access, for example. I'm gonna attach the S3 read-only access. So next, add permissions. So let's go back to the CLI, to the SSH machine, and try again. As you can see here, now we can access all the S3 buckets from AWS S3 because we just attached the permission for our profile to do it. And that's it. Now you know how to set up AWS CLI on a Linux machine. As a bonus section, I created another user, which is the test CLI 2. So now I'm gonna show to you how we can use multiple profiles with AWS CLI. This is useful when we have multiple AWS accounts and then you want to switch between them. So let's proceed. So here we're going to create a new set of credentials for this user. Let's go to access keys, CLI, just like we did before. Next, and that's it. Now back to the machine. I'm gonna do AWS figure -- profile. Now I'm gonna create a profile here. I'm gonna call it user2. So we already copied the access key. Let's paste it here. Let's go back and copy the secret access key. Paste it here. The default region is going to be US West 2. Default format. Perfect. Now if we do AWS configure and list profiles, you can see here that we have the default profile that we created previously and the new profile, which is the user2. So if I do, for example, AWS S3 LS, it's going to use the default user. As you saw previously, the default user has access to S3. But now if I do AWS S3 LS -- profile, it's going to be the user2. In this case, I'm trying to access the S3 LS command using the user2 profile. And in this case, the user2 doesn't have access to the S3 permissions. And that's it. This is how you can manage multiple users with AWS CLI. As a second bonus section, I'm going to show to you how you can configure credentials from a CSV file. So you can use the import command from AWS configure to read credentials from a CSV file. So in order to import credentials from a CSV file, we basically need to follow this command, AWS configure import -csv, and then the path to the file. Please observe here that I already have a testing CSV file called file_credentials.csv with 2 lines. The first line is the header with the username, the access key ID, and the secret access key ID. The username is the profile, which is user3, column, the access key ID, column, the secret access key ID. Please make sure that your CSV file follows this format. If the format is different, possibly it will fail when you try to import this CSV file as a AWS CLI profile. So we do AWS configure import -csv and then file column / and then the path to the file. Since the file is on the same directory as the command that we are running, so it's going to be file credentials.csv. Perfect. So now let's try again to list all the profiles. Let's clear this and then we do AWS configure list profiles. And that's it. Now we have the default profile, the user2, the second profile, and the user3, which is the profile from the CSV file. And that's it. If you have any doubts or you want to see other approaches like the single sign-on with IAM Identity Center, just let me know in the comment section. I hope you liked it, and I see you in the next time.